Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Energy Panel. I'm Isabella, and I'm going to be your host for the next 45 minutes. We're waiting for one more guest to join us, but we're going to start in. So we're all here now. Okay, so in the true spirit of the summit, I would like everyone to take a minute of mindfulness to connect with the earth. So you're welcome to close your eyes or to stay as you are. Just do a little bit of a breathing and a breathe out. Just connect with your body, with your heart. If you can take your mind to the sole of your feet, if you can imagine you growing these energetical roots to the earth, to the center of the earth, and you're connecting and you're breathing in the energy of the earth. I sometimes imagine the energy is green and is coming all the way to my body and to my heart. And here I'm going to take a moment of gratitude. I'm going to express my gratitude for everyone joining us today, to my amazing speakers, to She Changes Climate for all the amazing work they're doing, and for everyone that has taken the time to join us. So I would like to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And you can breathe out and release that energy around us all. Okay, so I'm Isabella Tatu, and I have been working in the energy sector for the last 25 years. I'm extremely passionate about the energy sector and the renewable. So I'm delighted to welcome my amazing speakers. And in no particular orders, I'd like to introduce them with their biography. So Howard Covington is a mathematician, physicist, banker, and money manager. He is the chair of Client Earth, Europe's leading public interest environmental law firm. He has seen Client Earth grow from 30 people to 300 people in the last 8 years. Client Earth's most recent publicly announced success is helping the Torres Strait Islander taking the Australian government to the United Nations Committee on Human Rights for failing to act on climate change. Ashwani Prabha is leading communication at the Global Gas and Oil Network, which has about 200 members organizations working on the phase out of oil and gas and an equitable transition. Ashwani is from Oceanic Island of Fiji with over a decade experience in local, regional, international climate communication. She was observer liaison and media advisor to the chief negotiator for the COP23 Fiji presidency, and has worked for leading organizations such as 350 International Climate Action Network, Worldwide Fund. She's currently board chair of the Pacific Island Climate Action Network and Listening Inspires Initiative. Bill McBeenan is an author, educator, and environmentalist who helped found 350.org, the first global grassroots climate campaign, and who has recently helped found Third Act to build a progressive organizing movement for people over the age of 60. Bill played a leading role in opposition to big oil pipeline projects like Keystone XL and the fossil fuel divestment campaign, which led to an amount of more than 40 trillion stepping back from oil, gas, and coal. Then we have Namira Hamid. She is the founder of Women in Energy Pakistan, a professional network for women in energy, climate, and a broader power sector with a presence across all major cities of Pakistan. She formerly served as a policy specialist in the government of Pakistan, working on renewable energy and energy efficiency with development partners. Currently based in London, Namira works to influence the outcomes of the UNFCCC negotiation on action for climate empowerment and to support governments to strengthen their national public engagement initiative. And lastly, we have Alexandra Salmon. She is the president of Igiagi Village Council in Alaska. She's also partner at Alaska Venture Fund and leads the investment in sustainable communities in the Bristol Bay region. Her tenure as village president has proven highly productive. Besides creating new jobs and opportunities for residents, she led a transition towards renewable, emerging the development of unique hydropower alternative energy producer known that harness energy from constant current of the Kiwajak River. So welcome everyone. What an amazing experience and perspective we have in this panel. Our topic is phasing out the energy and how we move into the renewable energies. And every one of you has a different perspective of the matter. As I was reading recently, the IEE had a press release saying that we're going to a historic moment right now where actually we're seeing a transition into the renewable energy. So with this in mind, I would like to start discussions between all of us, and I would like to ask you, what is your vision for 2030? And then we can continue on to see what is required, and all of us, you can bring the perspective from different angles. Just to mention, we have only 45 minutes, including the introduction, and we have a Q&A session for 50 minutes, which we'd like to engage with the audience. So if I can start with you, Bill, you're the first on my screen. If you can please share with us what is your vision for the 2030 and how would you think what is needed to achieve that?
Well, 2030 is not very far away. By my watch, about 7 years. And so we're going to have to make do with the things that we have now. Those things, above all, are solar panels, wind turbines, and the batteries to store the energy that they produce. The price of these has dropped dramatically over the last 5 or 10 years to the point where the cheapest way to generate power on our planet is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. So I think that the task between now and 2030 is all out deployment of those resources as fast as possible. Then we will look up in 2030 and see where we are and what the next set of events is going to have to be. But if we do everything right at this point, we may be able to get us on a path where the ongoing existence of civilizations is no longer in question the way it is now.
Okay, great. Alexandra, I'm coming to you with the same question, please.
Yes, so Igiugig is a federally recognized tribe, and we're the only government where we live. And so we own and operate all of the infrastructure, the fuel farm, the electric utility. We have a really good baseline of how much fuel people are using, what we're using for heating and electricity. And so our tribe actually adopted a very aggressive vision for 2030. We would like to decrease fuel usage by 50%. And so we've developed all of our metrics and how we will hold ourselves accountable to that goal. In the meantime, we've been working really hard to implement some of these renewable technologies that Bill mentioned, and we put in a battery energy storage system, and that whole system will start being commissioned through this 2023. So we're finally at a position to be able to integrate all the different renewables. We also didn't want to be single renewable energy resource dependent. So we really diversified our portfolio. We're looking at wind, hydro, and solar. So we do have an aggressive vision, Guyana.
That is amazing. I mean, you already have achieved so much with the hydropower. So it's incredible work. Ashwini, I'm coming to you now. Would you share your vision as well?
Bula Vinaka, Nisambula, and Namaste. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So for me, somebody who comes from the Pacific Island, where we think, even 2030 is getting a bit too late for us. And at the moment, I'm in Europe, and what I'm seeing here is a big scramble for gas. Governments and industry thinking that they can continue fossil fuel industry life by going for gas rather than renewable energy directly. So what I would like to say is, instead of the predictions and research, they show that like the fossil fuel industry plans to double their production. So I would say by 2030, they actually need to go deeper, cut down that production. And actually we here probably need to dismantle the fossil fuel industry, because what they're doing is just spreading false solution and trying to expand their life. So we're actually not going to achieve that 2030 target if we continue with the industry style right now. So what I would say my vision is to dismantle the industry completely and divest, get rid of their assets, and in fact, really truly invest in renewable energy, which is not happening. There's lots of promises, but not enough investment in the renewable energy. And as a Pacific Islander, the last thing I would like to say for 2030 or even like tomorrow, what we need to do is make the fossil fuel industry pay for the loss and damages that they've caused everywhere in the world, from Africa to Asia to Europe. Even people here are facing the climate crisis now and are aware of that. So I would say my vision is that the industry is dismantled. Thank you.
So Ashwini, can I ask you, you mentioned about the investment or the lack of it. So if I can pick your brain on that, how do you think we can make investment? Why is that lacking?
So I'm not the fossil fuel finance expert, but
No, in your opinion, from your perspective.
Because there is a lot of disinformation coming from the industry as to where the money should go, and the subsidies from the governments is actually going to more oil and gas rather than more renewable energy. The subsidies are not going in the right place. And also what's happening is the business plans that are coming forward, they are not renewable energy based. I think Bill might be able to answer this better, but what we are seeing is that there is actually false assumption that we need gas before transitioning to renewable energy. And so we invest money in gas rather than investing in transition, in renewables, in clean energy. And that's where the finance game is not correct. And the banks need to be held accountable for that. So the banks, the governments who are not investing in the right place.
So going back to Bill, would you like to add something on that?
Just to say that as usual, Ashwini is exactly right. There's been this, the fossil fuel industry's biggest goal is to continue having something to burn. And if it can't be coal and it can't be oil, they'll settle for gas. The problem is that all these things produce greenhouse gases, and natural gas in particular produces huge amounts of methane, which is a potent heat trapping gas. So the good news is that the good Lord saw fit to put a large ball of burning gas 93 million miles away in the sky, and we now know how to make full use of it to get done what we need doing. That's where the burning has to take place. And our job is to capture those rays on photovoltaic panels and to take advantage of the fact that the sun differentially heats the earth so that causing the wind to blow, and we can capture that in turbines. And that's our future. And the good news is that's now the cheapest way to generate power too. So the only reason that we're even talking about this is because the fossil fuel industry's business model requires that we keep burning things. And so in order to try and keep their business model going, we keep trying to come up with new stuff to set on fire. But in fact, what has to go is the fossil fuel industry's business model.
Yes. Going back to Howard, we're moving to you. If you can go back as well, tell us about the vision and what do you think needs to be done? And then also if you have any additional comment to mention on the investment side and why is the money lacking for the renewable side?
Surely, Isabel, and hello everyone. So just to say that Client Earth, the firm I represent, is a band of legal warriors. There are 300 of them, 200 are women, and all of the top management are women. And they are aggressively attacking companies around the world to hold them to their promises and commitments to reduce emissions. They are holding governments to their promises, and they're helping governments around the world to implement laws and policies that will reduce emissions. My vision from a legal point of view is this. We know, everyone now knows, that fossil fuel emissions, carbon emissions, are doing immense damage. I would like to see the full legal apparatus turned on the directors of companies so that they become liable personally for the damage that emissions from the companies and their products cause. We're a long way from that, but judgment by judgment, we might get there by 2030.
Great, thank you, Howard. Namira, to you now. If you can share with us your vision for 2030, and if you have anything to add on the side we're just talking about the lack of investment on the renewable energy from your perspective?
It's a pleasure to be speaking alongside these excellent speakers. Just to reiterate what the other panelists have said before me, had we invested massively in renewable energy in the past, we would not be in the middle of a climate emergency now. And the link between the two has been apparent for a lot of us for the past few decades, but I think it's becoming apparent for the public masses now, which for me is the critical point. When the public pressure from our citizens grows on our governments and the business leaders, that's when we start to see legs shaking and the conversations within the room starting to change. So from my home country in Pakistan, we see a rising young voice calling for radical change to move away from imported fuels towards indigenous solar and wind. There were so many of us who were working inside the rooms calling for the same, but it's when we started getting pressure from outside of these boardrooms and meeting rooms is when the conversation started to tilt within these corporate headquarters. I'm currently based in the UK, where research suggests that concerns remain high. And I'm here linking the fossil fuels with clean energy transition, but also with climate change, because for us, many of us attending these panels, the conversation is the same conversation. So the population within the UK, in a recent study, when asked about a range of issues, climate change was the second biggest concern facing adults in Great Britain at 74%, with the rising cost of living being the main concern at 79%. The data shows that the more worried people are about climate, the more worried they are about cost of living and cost of energy, which we see. So this for me is very encouraging that we have been able to place climate change and also the clean energy transition as an urgent agenda, not just in the global south, but also increasingly now within the public in the global north.
Yes, thank you, Namira. So what I'd like to invite to look at how the roles of different parts that we're doing, it's helping to make the transition happen. So Howard, if we go back to the law, like you're representing that perspective, how do you think the law will help to make just transition happen so we achieve the 2030 vision?
So to make a transition happen as quickly as we need it to happen, we have to increase investment in clean energy from about $1 trillion a year, which it is now, up to something like $4 trillion a year. It's a big increase that is needed. It can't be done unless governments help the private sector massively to invest. To do that, you need legal frameworks in countries which make investment in clean energy technologies easy to do and fair for everyone. You need also to be able to put pressure on governments to do these things, to speed up investment in clean technology. And one way of doing that is to make the entitlement to a stable climate a human right, so that governments can be taken to court for their failure to combat climate change. So there you are, two things. One, laying the legal commercial framework to facilitate clean energy investment, and at the other end, working with human rights to pressure government. There's two ideas.
Yeah, so the investment is, we're coming back to the previous topic, right? I mean, I'm working in the shipping sector and we're looking at renewables, and it's the same, the investment, there are so many energies, so many possibilities. The investment, we need those funds to make things happen. So it's really who is providing the funds. So Elise mentioned there will be a session later about the finance and banking. So please, I'm looking forward for that. So everyone, yeah, let's see what the panel discussion will be on that subject. With regards to the same questions, I'd like to bring Bill and Ashwani talking about what is the role of the movement to play in this just transition? So if you can both bring your perspective, would be great.
Ashwini, why don't you go first there? I'll follow you.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll give a very small example about movement building in the Pacific. What we've done is brought something that's very unique, and we'll touch to Howard's point about there is a ICJ advisory opinion being sought by Vanuatu government, one of the Pacific Island governments. And this actually came from students. Just a bunch of students trying to campaign on climate change, and they managed to push this to their government, and now this is on the international agenda. So this shows how movement building and slowly different pieces can come together, because as single just students by themselves on a small isolated island wouldn't have made that difference. But because they've now got the Caribbean and the African countries and others, sort of 85 countries out there supporting that ICJ advisory opinion, this might actually make a shift on global level. So that's on a political front. But what's happening, for example, in Global Gas and Oil Network, where I'm sitting, is we have brought together think tanks, we've brought together researchers, and then we've brought together activists. We have different actors coming together and pushing on the transition and pushing for a phase out of fossil fuel. And this is also unique because just activists by themselves have a certain narrative, right? A certain story to tell. But then when you bring researchers, then you bring a bit of scientists, and then some grassroots people, everybody together, the fight becomes stronger because you can see the story from different angles. Now, one thing that some people may not be aware of is that fossil fuel industry is very strong when it comes to petrochemicals and the pollution they are causing, the air pollution, the human rights violations that they are causing. And sometimes we don't even link them to all these intersectional issues. And what movement building can do is actually bring those diverse issues together, like looking through the intersectionalities, because everything overlaps. Like what's happening in Nigeria or Mozambique, how the fossil fuel extraction has been causing vast pollutions and human right abuses simply. But nobody's connecting those dots to say that, oh, it's the industry, and they are also responsible for the war, for so many civil wars. And also, let's go to Ukraine or in Europe, like what's happening right now. So bringing all those threads together is the power of the movement, and then pushing on big industries and banks and other outfits out there. Over to you, Bill.
Well, thank you. And first of all, it's good to see the map of Fiji behind you, because it reminds us that the Pacific Climate Warriors have been the single best example, perhaps, of movement building across the entire world. I think that some of the stuff that we need to see happen over the next few years is going to happen because a business interests want it to happen. So there's a certain amount of work on solar panels and wind turbines and stuff that's going to get done because it makes economic sense. As Ashwini has said, one of the jobs of movements is to do the work, the other half of this work, which is to make life hard for the fossil fuel industry, to try and drive it to extinction as quickly as possible. That won't happen automatically. They're highly committed to continuing their business model as long as they can. They have a lot of cash flow to do it. And they have a lot of political power in many places, including my country, the United States, because of their ability to use their money to game the political system. So one of the jobs of movements is going to be to continue to be in the face of the Exxons and the Chevrons and the Totals and things of the world. And I think one of the places we're really going to see this at Sharm el-Sheikh is a lot of attention on this particular pipeline, the East Africa crude oil pipeline project. And I'm really glad that our Ashwini Mite colleagues at 350 and elsewhere have been standing up hard to these kind of shameful enterprises.
Great, thank you, Bill and Ashwini. Now I'd like to go to Alexa Anna and to ask her, what is the role of communities in reaching the vision?
Guiana, so first of all, it's just so energizing to be on a panel with all of you phenomenal speakers. And I feel very passionately about community and coming at this of Igiugig's example, we're a nation of 70 people living very, very remotely in rural Alaska. We're all islanded kind of microgrids out there. In a state that has an enormous amount of land mass, has the most ocean coastline of, the whole rest of the United States combined, I think. And we live in a state that's relatively new, and 90% of the budget, the state's entire fiscal budget, is based off the cost of oil. And I think to myself, there's states and countries that are completely tied to the fossil fuel industry to the point where they can't operate or even think of operating beyond that. There are no incentives to this transition to clean energy. So the fact that our tribe is going about it from a place of tribal sovereignty is really powerful to me. We have, our people have lived in place for over 8,000 years in my community. So when I talk to our future generations, I tell them, you have an inherent right to these lands and waters, and we have a right to self-determine what type of energy system we want to use. And that's why we have been proving and so dedicated to proving the hydro technology, because the river that we live on has the largest supply of sockeye salmon run in the globe. We supply over 25% from our one watershed. And so if we can prove a hydropower that can, in this river that is compatible with our fisheries, then and make a business plan that works in a state that disincentivizes this actual transition. And doing this completely remotely, I've always felt that if it can be done there, it can be done anywhere in the world. So just using community to set the example and also break the mold, because the system, the status quo isn't working. And so what other, what can we prove? And to me, when you have a community that self-determines and sets its own goals, that's where your sustainability is. They're going to sustain that. And in the process, hopefully inform better government. So right now, not only are we trying to prove and make this transition in our community, but actually empower that local Indigenous voice that says, okay, regulators, we will tell you when the fish are running and when we will shut off our own device, rather than it being from the top down, a ground up fed system. But I mean, every community is so unique and so different. I just think of all of the opportunities we have the globe over as each community plans out and makes its own transition. And like I said, if we can do it in this harsh climate right now, and change policy, clean energy policy in the future, then hopefully make the path forward easier for everyone.
That is great. Thank you. Namira, back to you. I'd like to understand from your perspective, what role does the adaptation plays and the loss and damage in this transition?
Very glad that you asked this very important question. As we know, this year's catastrophic flooding in Pakistan directly affected at least 33 million people, and the costs were estimated at over $30 billion. And Pakistan is, of course, not alone in this. Deadly floods in Nigeria, drought in Somalia, one of the worst rainy seasons in Sudan this summer, and the worst floods for a century in Bangladesh and parts of India. So all of this wreaked havoc and destruction to lives and livelihoods. So this conversation of adaptation and loss and damages cannot be more urgent than now. Pakistan, as chair of the Group of 77, and China have been pushing for a loss and damage facility, finance facility. This facility would look towards funds from large emitters to countries dealing with loss and damage caused by climate change. And there's a lot of politics going around this topic. Governments and businesses don't even want to enter formal talks on this. But what do the citizens, what do the civil societies, what do other organizations of our countries think about this? And I really want to mention just one study. A recent study by my current organization, Climate Outreach and Partners, reveals that a majority of European young people, European young adults are in favor of richer countries compensating poorer countries that are facing loss and damage as a result of climate change. And almost 1 in 8 young adults are prepared to break the law to tackle climate change. Young adults are concerned, legitimately so, about climate change and support the idea of bringing ethics and morality back into the question and back into the conversations. And there's widespread support for mechanisms like the polluter pays principle. So this is just to sort of connect it back to conversations that we will be seeing at COP27. And I don't want to jump the gun, but sort of the conversation around loss and damage still not being on the official agenda of the COP27 conversations and negotiations is not reflective of the current realities and what the public perceptions say, and the data that the data suggests.
Yes, that is very true. That is very interesting study, Namira. Maybe later you can share it with me about the 1 to 8 young children. Yeah. Bill, I know that you have to go soon. You have only like, I think, 5 minutes more. We enter in now the Q&A session, and there is a question for you from Elise, I think. So, she's asking, how do you make sure that the war in Ukraine is not driving even more capitals in oil and gas development in the Middle East?
Well, the war in Ukraine is driving more capital, at least in the short term, in this direction. So we have to do a few things. One is buttress every effort that's also being made in the EU to speed up the deployment of renewable energy. The war in Ukraine cuts both ways, and it clearly, in the long term or medium term, is convincing the EU to move more quickly in the direction of clean energy. But in the very short term, people are scrambling to try and get more natural gas in from non-Russian sources. At Third Act here in the States, we've sponsored a program called Heat Pumps for Peace and Freedom to get renewable technology across the Atlantic as quickly as possible. And in fact, the Biden administration has now decided to devote $250 million to this task, which is at least something. The other thing we have to do is, and here I borrow a lead from Ashwini and my old colleague, Svetlana Romanko, who's emerged as the great voice around energy in her native Ukraine in this past year. Remind everybody constantly that fossil fuel, besides producing climate change and besides killing 9 million people a year just from breathing its combustion byproducts, also is inextricably linked to fascism and totalitarianism. The reason that Vladimir Putin could invade Ukraine is because he has a lot of oil and gas. It's 60% of his export earnings. Look around your house for something made in Russia. If you want to, boycott it or something, you won't find anything. They don't do anything. It's just a big gas station. And so our job is to keep reminding people that in the fight for human freedom and against the kind of barbaric military operation that Putin has undertaken, getting off fossil fuel is one huge step. One of the good things about the sun and the wind is that neither Vladimir Putin nor the King of Saudi Arabia nor the Koch brothers can cut off the sun nor block the wind from blowing. These are our common resource. They belong to all of us. And that's a great reason to be moving strongly in those directions.
Great. Thank you so much. There is a very interesting questions from Don. It's actually it's a questions for each one of us. Have you minimized your greenhouse gas emissions? Do you tenaciously encourage other consumers, individuals, organizations, businesses, government to do the same? So, well, I have to say that I've been really looking at my emissions this year, and I'm doing lots of steps to reduce everything from waste, from what I eat, to my personal lifestyle and my family. It's really important. We're actually talking recently about the food, right? The waste in the food from everyone. So if I will ask each one of you to maybe share with us steps that you're doing it in your own individual life to reduce these emissions. I think any tips for the audience? How to do that? So I'll start with you, Bill, again.
All right, that's great, because then I do have to leave, and I'm
yes,
sorry.
I know.
So You know, my house is covered with solar panels. They're connected to an electric vehicle. We have air source heat pumps. The kitchen now uses magnetic induction to cook food. I'm proud of those things, but I do not think that that's how we're going to solve this problem. We're at a point now where we can't make the math work one household at a time. So I think the most important thing an individual can do is be a little less of an individual and join together with others in movements large enough to make change. We get a lot of very good ideas about this kind of collective behavior from indigenous communities around the world who have not succumbed to quite the same level of individualism that's marked, say, my society. And we get a lot of good ideas from the people who've spent the last 100 years teaching us how to build big movements. Nonviolent social movement building is along with the solar panel, is the most important technology to emerge from the 20th century. Gandhi and Dr. King and the suffragettes and people working from the margins taught us how to build big movements. If we make it through this century, it will be because we took heed of those lessons and learned how to work together to allow the small and the many to beat the mighty and the few. So that's as good as I've got, and what a pleasure to get to join this conversation. Hope I see some of you in Egypt in a few days, and in the meantime, many, many thanks to all who keep this fight going every day.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill, for coming, and all the best. Alexandra, if we can continue the conversation and focus on the social and environmental, how can we bring communities into, that would be great. Daisy, I really enjoy the chats on the group. As you can see, everyone wants to build the communities to move away. We're 20s. So I mentioned we're 20 is too late to do individual. We need to focus on systemic and governmental change. So if we can focus on these 2 points, we have only, I think, 5 more minutes until the session is finished. So let's take these 5 minutes to focus on these 2 points. On social movement and how we can achieve that as communities. Alexandra, would you like to start first? You're my first on my screen, so I can go in that way.
Sure. You know, I was actually spurred and still thinking about the previous question on what communities do in the individual versus the collective. And what I appreciate is our community came together and set the goals to move off of fossil fuels. And then we work proving these different technologies, but the companies must talk to each other. Like, we'll select our partners, but with the technology we're putting in our grid has to support all the different renewables that we're interested in. So we have regular meetings, so the microgrid people of all the different technologies are talking to each other, which is unique. A lot of times when you have a small community, you don't have that level of collaboration, but that was the goal of the community. You know, we have times in the winter when the river will not flow as quickly, and we might need the wind power. In addition, we have a strong culture of energy efficiency. So the tribe is committed to any new construction being 5-star Energy Plus. And so we're spending an inordinate amount of money to build 5-star homes and to use, you know, the newest building the tribe is putting in will not use fossil fuels. It will actually use ground source heat pumps. And, you know, we're just moving away as much as we can. At the same time, we can't transition completely to electricity because it's still cost prohibitive as we transition. We're at almost $1 a kilowatt hour where I live. But that culture of like recycling and growing your own food locally, all of that. So we have a very holistic approach to energy. And it really includes protecting our water source. So most of the villages in our watershed have been on a path to renewables, which I'm really proud about. However, you have situations where there's very large industry that would also like to do large scale open pit mining at the headwaters of these where we live, because that argument is still out there that we need, you know, all of these copper and heavy metals in order to make this transition, and that it's safer to do it in our neck of the woods because we have more stringent environmental laws than other places on the globe. And I think it's mobilizing the movement to tell the true narratives and to let the local voices speak louder, because where we live, we feel that the water is more precious than the gold. And that while it's providing for all of our energy and our food, that it needs to be protected, and that we don't make decisions that are contributing to the problem rather than solving it. So thank you. There's a lot of challenges, but I also see immense opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Ashwini, to you, the same.
You
please?
know, I take the privilege to deviate a little bit. I think I want to talk about COP because a lot of people, and I know we have very little time, and a lot of you are going to be at the COP. They're like in 2 days, 3 days. What I want to say is at this COP, we need to tell the governments that gas is not the solution to the renewable future, that gas has no place in the energy transition. And we also need to make sure that the governments hear loud and clear that polluters have no place at the table. Because this session was about fossil fuel phase out. And actually, these polluters are there in the COP, changing the text, present in the government delegations, and constantly undermining the COP process. I'm a bit like wanting to vomit at the end of every COP because we islanders are bloody outnumbered by the industry. They are writing the text all over the place and manipulating the whole conversation. So I want all of you to be the watchdogs and kick out polluters at this COP.
Thank you, Ashwini. So much passion. I love it. Howard, would you like to add your comments, please?
Yeah, the systemic change is needed urgently. The law can bring it about. Here's an example. We at Client Earth wondered how we could help Europe flip from diesel vehicles to electric vehicles. So we started bringing legal actions country by country, city by city to improve the quality of air and get diesel bans in each city. After 2 or 3 years of doing that, we had got diesel bans in 18 different cities throughout Europe, and we precipitated, or we helped precipitate, the flip from diesel cars to electric vehicles. Now, that's an immense change for Europe. It's now well underway. It's the kind of thing the law can do because judges look at decisions made by other judges. So I am optimistic as the world shifts that the legal system will provide a lot of leverage for bringing about systemic change.
Great, thank you. I'm enjoying because there's so much conversation on our chat. I really like the engagement of everyone. Namira, over to you, please.
I'll take the same sort of line that Ashwini did, is that in terms of visibility of who's at the COP, we see a stark difference in who gets to attend the negotiations and who gets to be inside the rooms that matter. So not just in the green zone, not just in our own panels speaking to each other, but inside the rooms that actually matter. Many fossil fuel lobbyists joined the COP talks to attempt to protect their industry from much needed action to keep coal, oil, and gas in the ground. We were told last year that in terms of participation at COP26, if the fossil fuel industry were a country, it would have been the single largest delegation at the conference. We cannot let this happen again. We need to ensure that we give equal weight to expert voices from the South, from the women, from the youth. But I'm still hopeful for this year's COP27. Egypt's vision has been ensuring that no country or group is left behind. And as we discussed before, loss and damage is likely to be a big topic of discussion in Sharm el-Sheikh. for which many of us are eagerly looking forward to. And I'd also like to quickly mention that this year we will see some headline statements from Pakistan at the COP27. Our Minister for Climate Change, Sherry Rehman, is a very effective speaker with very strong diplomatic and political credentials. So I look forward to seeing some strong female leadership from the Global South this year as well.
Yeah, great. I'm looking forward to that as well. So we're approaching the end. Unfortunately, it's already 12:45 UK time. Well, I think we can continue this conversation for a long time. I'd like to thank each one of you to come, and I wish you all the luck with lots of success in the next week meetings. I know everyone is really going to be very busy. And I would like to just summarize some of the action points we had discussed today, and that we're going to include for the She Changes Climate action and for the press release. So one is about the investment in renewable energies policies and communities. We need to empower them. So, and of course, the driving diverse issues, bringing together, and the requirement of the law and regulations. So I'd like to say again, thank you to everyone who has participated at this panel, all the questions, all the engagement, and especially all the speakers. So, and to She Changes Climate for organizing this amazing summit. And good luck with the rest of the seminars this afternoon. There will be amazing topics, so please stay and watch them. Thank you again, everyone. And I'm grateful for you being here.